Hey, everybody, it is Sherry Downer here at Tier 1 Interventions Podcast. It's great to have you here with us where we talk about the core of the math classroom. Today, we're going to be talking more about pizzas, rectangles, lockers. Oh my!
Last week, we started a 10-segment series you're seeing. Here's segment 2 from our October workshop. If you are enjoying what you are learning, please subscribe and leave a comment.
I think that was the right order. Over to John Lee.
That was my intention going into yesterday. So when I went into the class yesterday, I said to the kids, we're going to do an exercise today. You're going to be up and moving. You're going to be collecting data, numbers. Each of you are going to end up with 2 numbers today. That's it. Now, ironically, this connects to another story. A couple of months ago, I was in this same classroom, and they were looking at subtraction and difference. And I'm not even sure how it came up, but I was coming in to actually do the locker problem with this group of students. And when I heard what they were doing in math classes, I walked in, I said, you know what? I said to the teacher, we're going to scrap. We're not going to do the task I was going to do with them today because I want to extend on what you have just been doing with them. So I'm going to teach just very on a whim, impromptu. And it was all about like measurements and difference in measurements. And there was something about weight. And I said, do any of you know how much you weigh? Just random question. And this little teeny weeny girl says, oh, I do. I said, oh, how much do you weigh? She said, 5 pounds. I said, come on up here. Come on up here, my sweet thing. I said, what do you all think? She says she weighs 5 pounds. What do you, yeah. Another little boy in the room said, that doesn't make any sense if she weighs 5 pounds. He says, because I weigh 98 pounds, but with my football gear, I weigh 106 pounds. And I'm like, ooh, this is interesting. I said to the class, would that make sense by looking at these two? I said, come on up here. So then we talked about more and less. Who weighs more? Oh, the boy definitely by looking weighs more. Now, we can do this exercise in 2nd grade. I wouldn't recommend doing this exercise in like 8th grade. Okay? I'm just going to put that disclaimer out there. Things get a little sensitive. 2nd graders, they don't care. So in looking at this, I was going to go through with a difference activity with their 2 weights and have them look on a number line because difference is subtraction. Subtraction is distance. So I was going to have them look at the girl's weight and the boy's weight on a number line, and we were going to find the difference, the distance, and create the subtraction problem that showed that subtraction is their distance from her weight to his weight. So I scrapped that and I said to the little girl, when you go home this weekend, I want you to ask how much you weigh. And then the next time I come back and tell me. She actually did. When I came back the next time, she said, my mom says I weigh 35 pounds. I said, that sounds so much better. Because I told the kids, look, when my baby boy was born, first day of his life, he weighed 8 pounds. So you can't weigh 5 pounds. And I'm telling the class this. And they're like, really? There was no concept here. So I knew I wanted to come back to this. So in that lesson that day, we took his 98 pounds without his football gear, 106 pounds with his football gear, and I was able to teach the lesson I wanted to with that difference. Now, this is turning into a long story, but it's important to hear all of it. You got to hear like how it all got set up. What is all the background? What is all of my pre-planning knowledge? Because if you come to Sherry and I's Masterclass once a month, this is important. And Sherry, if you want to say something about this, I think this is a good time to do that. But if you come to Sherry and I's Masterclass once a month, one of the things in our lesson delivery that is totally left off, even when we teach with a textbook, is a pre-planning before our planning. So all of us plan for lessons and we deliver lessons. But there's two other parts of teaching that is missing in that. The first part that's the most important that almost nobody does is a pre-planning, which is that CES, that culture, that non-academic and academic essentials, and the idea of seasons. So there's an entire pre-planning that I have to have in my mind before I do my regular planning of every lesson or every week's lessons. Then I have my presentation, which is the delivery, the actual, I'm doing this in the classroom with students. And then the other part that's missing is the post planning. And in Sherry and I's masterclass each month, we go through this process of how to set up a good structure for planning long term and short term. Sherry, any follow up on the masterclass that you want to share?
I'm just trying to set it up in the system because I forgot to do that. The next
Oh, no
one will
problem.
be the next one, depending on when you hear this episode, but is usually the second to Wednesday of the month. But if this is aired after the next one in November, think about the second Wednesday at 7 p.m. Look in school. Look in the schoolhouse. It is a free masterclass. The link will be in the schoolhouse.
Awesome, awesome. I was just thinking about that promotion, Sherry, and I wanted to make sure that we had that catch for people because that's really a big part of this story. I wouldn't have been able to teach this second grade lesson without all four of the planning stages, without all four of those stages. And in the master class, we teach those stages and how to think in teaching through those stages so that the outcomes can be similar to what I'm going to share with you today. Anybody have any thoughts, questions, or comments before I then tell you about the experience? And I'm not sure, Natalie, if you've had something to say or you want to, and if nobody has any, that's fine. I'm going to continue. But any thoughts, questions, or comments about the setup going into yesterday's lesson before I go into that part of the story?
You just need to know that this little 5-pound girl is the cutest little thing you've ever seen in your whole entire life. Like, adorable. Just, that's important.
It is so important because she really could be 5 pounds if we just put that out there. Now, I knew she would. Natalie just wanted to pick this girl up and hold her in one palm of her hand. She's just the most precious thing. Sweetest little girl. So, backing up, yesterday, Natalie and I go in. We tell the kids you're going to get 2 data points. I brought a scale that they could step on. I gave some preview to that scale because I knew these kids were not going to know how to read a scale and not going to know how to measure. I knew this. And I'm not going to do this big, like, whole class lesson on how to do these things. This is where achievement formula comes into play. Mini lesson after experience. Mini lesson after experience. We have to, I don't want to say eliminate, but we have to, more often than not, let kids swim in the struggle, swim in the experience incorrectly before we mini lesson as much as we can. Because how often do you hear the phrase, we need to learn from our mistakes? We are universally not allowing students to make enough mistakes in their experiences. And then when they do, we are too often saving them. Explicit example from yesterday.
Ooh, could
The
you
classroom
repeat that
teacher
again?
is oh, go ahead, Kirk.
I want you just to repeat the last 2 sentences that you said. That's important. They were huge.
It may not be exactly what I said, but Kirk, I allow you to say them in your own words when I finish. Number one, we must let kids experience before we tell them through a mini lesson. Because we often hear the phrase, we learn through our mistakes. And too often, all the time in traditional math classrooms, we don't let students experience mistakes. And when we do give them that opportunity, we save them from their struggle way too soon. That may not be exactly what I said, so anyone else want to reiterate in your own words, because I agree with the importance of those statements.
Put them in the schoolroom. Look in the schoolroom for them.
Yes, Kirk, Natalie, anybody, if you can type that for me so that I don't have to pause and do it, that would be amazing. But there it is. So that was another one of my goals yesterday. So the only thing I did to prompt these students, and the classroom teacher was there, Natalie was there, I was there. The only thing I did to prompt these students was I showed them the scale that they were going to step on. Many of them had seen a scale, and some of the kids were like, "Oh, in wrestling we do our weights." I'm like, "That's exactly what you're going to do. That's going to be one of your numbers you're going to collect today." And other students are like, "Oh, I have one of those at home." Beautiful. So I didn't do a lot of teaching on the scale, but on the scale, the only numbers that were listed were even multiples of 10. So it was 10, no, it was 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. So the big line in the middle of 40 and 60 was 50. And I knew this was going to happen. I didn't point it out in a mini lesson before I released the kids. I knew I was going to facilitate the kids coming back and stepping on the scale. So I was going to mini lesson when I brought the table group back for, I would have 4 or 5 kids. And then I would say, what's the exact number between 40 and 60? So I didn't mini lesson that before. I was going to mini lesson that as the kids came back and looked at it. This is important to understand. This is what I mean by mini lesson after they experience. The second thing I did to prompt them was I brought meter sticks. I also brought tape measures, but I like to use meter sticks better because they're more difficult for kids to use than a tape measure. That's why I do it. So I brought meter sticks, and they were actually meter sticks. And the classroom teacher said, this is so exciting because the kids have measured themselves this year, but they measured themselves in centimeters. I knew I was coming in to measure, for them to measure in inches. So this was going to be perfect. I didn't know the kids had measured themselves already this year. It didn't matter. It wasn't here nor there because it's all chicken and egg when we do these lessons. So I said, that's awesome. So I go to the centimeter side and I ask kids, what are these numbers? They knew centimeters. Some of them knew that the whole stick was 100 centimeters. They struggled to get that 100 centimeters, that this was a meter. This is a meter stick, but I got a couple of them to say that. So I confirmed all that because these are facts I wanted to confirm. This wasn't the discovery part. So I said, this is a meter stick. What is it? A meter stick. There are 100 centimeters in a meter. 100 centimeters in a meter. All these little tick marks are centimeters. Look, Kirk's got a visual. That's exactly what I showed them. Okay. So I'm showing them this. You've got centimeters. The numbers are close together. And you guys, when you measured yourself, you measured in centimeters. So that was my preview, showed it. That was it. Then I flipped it to the other side and I said, does anybody know what these numbers are? These numbers are further apart. There aren't as many. There aren't 100 of these numbers on the other side. One kid finally said inches. I'm like, that is correct. So this is a perfect example of confirm right away. This is a fact I want them to know. I'm confirming. These are inches. How many inches do you see? There were a little more than 39 inches. I said to them, does anybody know how many inches are in a foot? Nobody did. I said, tell me how many inches are in a foot on 3. 1, 2, 3. I'm like, that's not a problem. I'm just going to tell you. Okay, I'm just going to tell you. This is another thing that I don't want kids to discover. Like, we're missing the boat on like fact fluency and number sense, or knowing things and discovering things. Long division is a procedure I don't want kids to discover. When I want kids to know the procedure of long division, we're not going to do an experience and a discovery activity. This is the time where I do a lesson, I tell you, and you mimic and model. Okay? So, however, if that is more than 50% of what I'm doing in my math classroom, that is a disservice. That is why kids are not achieving. So I'm not telling you not to tell, but we need to know when the appropriate time is to just tell and not tell. And there are two examples. When I want these kids to know how many inches are in a foot, I'm just going to tell them. I'm going to tell them, I'm going to tell them, I'm going to tell them, and then they're going to tell me. They're going to tell me. They're going to tell me. And I'm going to constantly be bringing this fact fluency into the classroom as much as possible.
Jonalee, I want to close out Tier 1 Interventions podcast. And that is, if you are listening to this podcast and you are thinking, how do I get involved? You want to head over to your show notes and click on the link. We are offering you to come to a session like this, where you get all 2.5 hours at one shot for $47. You can then join another session for another $47, or you can buy the whole year for $497. Plus, you have to buy if you're going to go buy the whole year, you're going to have to buy level 1 as well. But the coaching and these conversations that we're having are $497. That sounds to me like a really good deal to really think the way you're thinking about not just mathematics, but occupational therapy delivery, speech therapy delivery, special ed delivery, and how we're helping these kids rethink, re-regulate, relearn, and think about life as whole.